They say money screams, but wealth whispers. Well, Beatrice van der Hoven never learned how to whisper. She was the woman who could get a chef fired because the ice in her water was too cloudy. Every server in the city knew her name, and every manager feared her shadow. She thought she was untouchable, sitting on her throne of old money and diamonds. But she made one fatal mistake. She tried to destroy the new waitress, Maximus. She didn't know that Maximus wasn't just carrying a tray. She was carrying a secret that would turn Beatrice's perfect world into a public circus. You are not going to believe how this ends. The Obsidian Room was the kind of restaurant where the menu didn't have prices. Located in the heart of Manhattan, just a stone's throw from Central Park, it was a dimly lit sanctuary of mahogany, velvet, and hushed conversations about mergers and acquisitions. The air smelled of truffle oil and fear. It was 7:15 p.m. on a rainy Tuesday when the atmosphere in the kitchen shifted from chaotic to catatonic. Julian, the general manager, a man whose suit cost more than most people's cars but who sweated like a sinner in church, burst through the swinging doors. His face was pale, his eyes wide. "She's here," Julian hissed, clapping his hands together nervously. "Table 4. The booth. I want the tablecloth ironed again. I want the silverware polished until you can see your own soul in the reflection. And for the love of God, nobody make eye contact unless she speaks to you." He didn't need to say her name. Everyone knew. Beatrice van der Hoven. She was the wife of Richard van der Hoven, a real estate mogul who owned half the skyline. While Richard was known for being a ruthless but generally quiet businessman, Beatrice was known for being a terror. She was a woman who treated service staff not like human beings, but like malfunctioning appliances. Last month, she had thrown a glass of Chardonnay at a busboy because it was served at 56 degrees instead of 54. "Who's taking table 4? Asked Marco, the head waiter, stepping back as if the table were radioactive. "I'm not doing it, Julian. I'm still on probation from the last time she said I looked at her diamond aggressively." Julian scanned the room, his desperation palpable. His eyes landed on the new girl. Maximus. Maximus Miller had only been working at the Obsidian Room for 3 weeks. She was 26, with sharp green eyes and a messy bun that she was constantly tucking back. She was quiet, efficient, and kept to herself. Nobody knew much about her, other than the fact that she picked up extra shifts whenever she could and drove a beat-up Honda Civic that sounded like a lawn-mower. "Maximus," Julian said, his voice trembling slightly. "You're up." Maximus looked up from the station where she was folding napkins. She didn't look scared. She just looked tired. "The Van der Hoven table?" "Yes," Julian said, rushing over to smooth out her apron. "Listen to me carefully. Do not speak unless spoken to. If she sends the food back, apologize and take it. Do not argue. Do not correct her. Do not breathe too loudly." Maximus gave a small, almost imperceptible shrug. "She's just a customer, Julian. I'll take the order." "She is not a customer," Marco whispered, leaning in. "She is a predator." Maximus grabbed her notepad. "I need the rent money, Marco. Unless she's going to eat me, I think I'll manage." She pushed through the double doors and walked onto the floor. The restaurant was buzzing, but table 4 was an island of silence. Beatrice sat in the center of the plush leather booth. She was a striking woman in her late 40s, wearing a Chanel suit that looked like it had been tailored on her body. Her blonde hair was pulled back so tight it looked painful. She was currently inspecting a fork, holding it up to the light with a look of utter disgust. Maximus approached the table. She didn't rush, and she didn't slink. She walked with a strange, calm cadence. "Good evening, Mrs. van der Hoven," Maximus said, her voice steady. "Welcome back to the obsidian room. Can I start you with some sparkling water while you wait for Mr. van der Hoven?" Beatrice didn't look up. She kept staring at the fork. She rotated it slowly. "This fork," Beatrice said, her voice low and raspy, like silk dragged over gravel. "It has a water spot." Maximus looked at the fork. It was pristine, but she didn't blink. "I apologize," Maximus said, reaching out to take it. "I'll bring you a fresh one immediately." Beatrice finally looked up. Her eyes were ice blue, cold and assessing. She scanned Maximus from her shoes to her hair, looking for a loose thread, a stain, a sign of weakness. "You're new," Beatrice stated. It wasn't a question, it was an accusation. "I am," Maximus replied politely. "Do you know who I am?" "You are Mrs. van der Hoven," Beatrice sneered. "Then you know I don't drink sparkling water. It bloats the face. I want hot water with lemon. The water must be boiling, and the lemon must be sliced thinly, not wedges. If I see a seed, I will have you fired before you can pour the cup." "Understood," Maximus said. She didn't write it down. "And," Beatrice added, just as Maximus turned to leave, "my husband is running late. He's closing a deal in Tokyo. I will be dining alone. Bring me the wine list, the reserve list, not the garbage you give the tourists." "Of course." Maximus walked back to the kitchen. Her heart was beating a little faster, not from fear, but from a strange sense of recognition. She had seen that look in Beatrice's eyes before, not here in New York, but somewhere else. Somewhere a long time ago. "How did it go?" Julian asked, wiping sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. "She wants hot water, thin lemon, no seeds," Maximus said, grabbing a fresh fork. "And the reserve list." "Oh God," Julian moaned. "She's drinking. When she drinks, she gets mean." Maximus paused at the door, looking back at her manager. "Julian, where is she from?" "Originally?" Julian blinked. "Beatrice?" "I don't know. Old money. Connecticut, I think. Or maybe the Hamptons. She's a Kensington by birth. Why?" Maximus narrowed her eyes. "No reason. Just curious." She walked back out. She knew a Kensington, and she knew that accent Beatrice was trying so hard to bury under layers of transatlantic polish. It wasn't from the Hamptons. It was from a place much further south, and much poorer. Maximus placed the fresh fork on the table. "Your water is coming right out, ma'am." Beatrice snatched the wine list from Maximus's hand. "Don't hover. It makes you look desperate." Maximus stepped back, clasping her hands behind her back. She watched Beatrice scan the list of wines that cost thousands of dollars. Beatrice's finger stopped at a Pinot Noir. "I'll have the 1999 Romane Conti," Beatrice announced loudly, ensuring the neighboring tables heard her. Maximus paused. The Romane Conti was $18,000 a bottle. "An excellent choice," Maximus said. "However, ma'am, if I may—" Beatrice snapped her head up. "If you may what? Are you going to tell me I can't afford it?" "No, ma'am," Maximus said smoothly. "I was going to suggest that the 2002 vintage might be drinking better right now. The 99 is currently going through a dumb phase. It's a bit closed." The restaurant went silent. Julian, watching from the shadows, looked like he was about to have a stroke. A waitress did not correct Beatrice van der Hoven. Beatrice's face turned a shade of crimson that clashed with her lipstick. "A dumb phase. You are a waitress. You carry plates. Do not presume to lecture me on oenology. Bring me the 99 and open it at the table. If you break the cork, you're paying for it." "As you wish," Maximus said. As Maximus walked away, a small smile touched her lips. She had set the trap. Now she just had to wait for Beatrice to walk into it. The bottle of 1999 Romane Conti was brought out like a religious artifact. Julian carried it himself, trembling, before handing it to Maximus. "Please," Julian whispered, "use the arso opener. Don't use the corkscrew. Be gentle." Maximus handled the bottle with the ease of a veteran sommelier. She presented the label to Beatrice. Beatrice barely glanced at it, waving her hand dismissively. "Open it. Pour it. Leave." Maximus expertly removed the foil. She inserted the prongs of the opener and twisted. The cork slid out with a soft, satisfying sigh. She poured a small taste into the crystal glass. Beatrice swirled it aggressively, splashing the crimson liquid high up the sides of the glass. She took a sip, swished it around her mouth, and swallowed. She made a face. "It's corked," Beatrice declared loudly. The air left the room. "Ma'am?" Maximus asked softly. "I said it's corked." Beatrice slammed the glass down, shattering the stem. Red wine flooded the pristine white tablecloth, looking like a crime scene. "It tastes like wet cardboard. This is vinegar. Are you trying to poison me?" Julian rushed forward, looking like he was about to faint. "Mrs. van der Hoven, I am so terribly sorry." "Get away from me!" Beatrice shrieked, standing up. The wine dripped from the table onto her Chanel skirt. "Look at this. This is incompetence. This is malice. This incompetent little girl served me spoiled wine." She pointed a manicured finger at Maximus. Maximus didn't flinch. She looked at the spilled wine. She looked at the bottle. She looked at Beatrice. "Ma'am," Maximus said, her voice cutting through the hysteria. "The wine is not corked." Beatrice's eyes bulged. "Excuse me? You are calling me a liar." "I am stating a fact," Maximus said. She picked up the bottle. "I smelled the cork. It's perfect. And respectfully, you didn't taste TCA, which causes the cork taint. You tasted the tannins. As I tried to warn you, the 99 is tight. It needs to breathe for at least 2 hours. You drank it straight from the bottle." "How dare you!" Beatrice screamed. "I know wine. I grew up in vineyards in Bordeaux. My father owned estates." This was the moment, the pivot point. Maximus took a step closer. She dropped the submissive server act. Her posture shifted. She looked Beatrice dead in the eye. "Bordeaux?" Maximus asked. "That's interesting, because you pronounced it Bordeaux just now." Beatrice froze. "And," Maximus continued, her voice rising just enough for the surrounding tables, who were now watching with rapt attention, to hear. "You're holding the glass by the bowl, warming the wine with your hand. Nobody who grew up on a vineyard does that. It alters the temperature." You insolent little rat," Beatrice stammered, looking around for support. "Julian, fire her. Fire her now. She is insulting me. She spilled this wine on me." "I didn't spill the wine, Beatrice," Maximus said, dropping the ma'am. "You broke the glass because you were performing. You wanted a scene. You wanted to send it back to show everyone you have power." "I am Beatrice van der Hoven," she shrieked. "I am a Kensington." "Are you?" Maximus asked. "Because you look a lot like Betty Sue from Okema, Oklahoma." The silence that followed was heavier than the wine bottle. Beatrice's face went from red to a ghostly, sheet white. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. "Oklahoma," a man at the next table whispered to his date. I don't know what you're talking about," Beatrice hissed, her voice suddenly shaking. "I have never been to Oklahoma." "Really?" Maximus tilted her head. "Because when you got angry just now, your accent slipped. You dropped the G on trying, and you said fixin' too under your breath when you looked at the menu earlier. I have a very good ear for accents." Maximus wasn't guessing. She was bluffing slightly on the specifics, but she had recognized the tell. The specific way Beatrice held her jaw when she was angry, it was the same way the girls in Maximus's hometown did it. It wasn't old money Connecticut lockjaw, it was rural tension. "Julian!" Beatrice screamed, grabbing her purse. "I am leaving. I am calling my husband. I am calling the owners. This place will be shut down by morning. And you," she pointed at Maximus, "you will never work in this city again." Beatrice turned to storm out, but in her haste and fury, she slipped on the puddle of wine she had created. It happened in slow motion. Her heels lost traction on the polished wood floor. She flailed, her arms windmilling, and she went down hard. She didn't get hurt, but she landed squarely on her backside in the middle of the dining room floor, her legs splayed, covered in $18,000 of wine. A stifle of laughter rippled through the room. Someone at the back actually guffawed. Beatrice sat there, soaked and stunned. She looked up at Maximus. Maximus didn't offer a hand. She simply reached into her apron, pulled out a clean white napkin, and gently dropped it onto Beatrice's lap. "Careful," Maximus said coolly. "The floor is slippery when you make a mess." Beatrice scrambled to her feet, humiliated beyond words, and ran out of the restaurant, the sound of her wet shoes squeaking against the floor, echoing like a clown's entrance. The restaurant erupted, not in applause, but in the low, chaotic murmur of gossip. Julian looked at Maximus. He looked terrified. "Maximus, what did you just do?" "I saved you a refund on the bottle," Maximus said, picking up the fallen bottle which, miraculously, hadn't shattered. "She broke the glass, not the bottle. We can still sell this by the glass at the bar. We'll call it the Bittersweet Revenge Special." "She's going to destroy us," Julian whispered, clutching his chest. "Richard van der Hoven is going to come down here and burn this place to the ground." "Let him come," Maximus said, her eyes darkening. "I have a few questions for Mr. van der Hoven, too." Because Maximus hadn't just recognized Beatrice's accent, she had recognized the name Kensington, and she knew that the real Kensington family had died out 10 years ago. Who was this woman? And why was she wearing a dead family's name like a costume? Maximus went back to the kitchen to grab a mop. The battle was won, but the war had just started, and Maximus knew that Beatrice, or Betty Sue, or whatever her name was, would not let this slide. She would come back. And next time, she wouldn't be alone. The next day, the atmosphere at the Obsidian Room was funereal. The kitchen staff moved in silence, pots and pans clinking softly like wind chimes in a graveyard. Everyone expected the doors to be locked by noon. Maximus arrived for her shift at 4:15 p.m. She parked her rusted Honda Civic around the block, took a deep breath, and walked in. Julian was waiting for her by the hostess stand. He looked like he hadn't slept in a week. His eyes were bloodshot, and he was wringing a linen napkin in his hands, as if trying to strangle it. "You came back," Julian whispered, half in awe, half in horror. "Maximus, are you insane? I have left 3 voicemails telling you not to come in." "I need the hours, Julian," Maximus said, clocking in. "And besides, if I don't show up, it looks like an admission of guilt. I did nothing wrong." "You humiliated the wife of the man who owns the building," Julian hissed. "Do you understand? Richard van der Hoven doesn't just own real estate, he owns people. He uses Skadden Arp's lawyers to sue people for breathing his air. The front door chimed. The air in the restaurant instantly froze. It wasn't dinner service yet. The restaurant was empty, save for the staff. Walking through the door was Richard van der Hoven. He was a mountain of a man, 6'4", with silver hair and a suit that cost more than Maximus's entire education. He didn't look angry. He looked efficient. He looked like a man who signed death warrants with the same emotion as signing a birthday card. and clinging to his arm, wearing oversized sunglasses and a dramatic neck brace that she certainly hadn't needed the night before, was Beatrice. "Mr. van der Hoven," Julian squeaked, rushing forward. We were just discussing the disciplinary action for the employee in question. Please allow me to—" Richard held up a single hand. Julian stopped dead. "Bring her here," Richard said. His voice was a low baritone that vibrated through the floorboards. Julian looked at Maximus. Maximus didn't wait to be summoned. She walked forward, her hands clasped in front of her, chin high. "I am Maximus," she said. Richard looked down at her. He had cold, grey eyes. He studied her for a long, uncomfortable minute. Beatrice, standing beside him, let out a theatrical whimper and clutched Richard's bicep. "That's her, Richard!" Beatrice cried, her voice trembling. "That's the girl who attacked me. She threw wine on me. She called me names. She said I was poor." Richard ignored his wife. He kept his eyes on Maximus. "My wife tells me you assaulted her," Richard said calmly. "She claims you intentionally poured a bottle of Romanée Conti on her and then physically pushed her to the floor." "Your wife is lying," Maximus said. The kitchen staff gasped. Marco, peeking through the kitchen porthole, made the sign of the cross. Richard's eyebrow twitched. "Lying?" "There are security cameras in the dining room, Mr. van der Hoven," Maximus said, pointing to the discreet black dome in the corner. "I assume a man of your intelligence checks the evidence before he makes a verdict. The footage will show she broke the glass herself in a fit of temper, and she slipped on her own spill because she was running away after I exposed her lack of knowledge about the wine." Beatrice stiffened. "Richard, are you going to let a servant talk to me like that?" The cameras were probably malfunctioning, or she tampered with them. Richard turned his head slowly to look at Beatrice. "The cameras at the Obsidian Room are cloud-based, Beatrice. They cannot be tampered with by a waitress." He turned back to Maximus. "I have already seen the footage." Maximus paused. "Then you know I'm innocent." "I know you didn't push her," Richard said, "but you embarrassed her. And by extension, you embarrassed me. In my world, Maximus, perception is reality. If my wife looks like a fool, I look like a fool who married a fool." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a checkbook. He uncapped a gold fountain pen. "I am going to write you a check for $50,000, Richard said, his tone bored. Maximus blinked. "Excuse me." "50,000, Richard repeated. "In exchange, you will sign a non-disclosure agreement stating that the incident last night never happened. You will apologize to my wife right now in front of your manager. And then you will walk out that door and never work in Manhattan again." He ripped the check out and held it toward her. It was more money than Maximus made in 2 years. It could fix her car. It could pay off her lingering debts. It could get her a new apartment in a safe neighborhood. Beatrice smirked beneath her sunglasses. "Go on," she taunted. "Take it. We know you need it. I bet you've never seen that many zeros in your life." Maximus looked at the check. Then she looked at Beatrice's smug face. The memory of why she was really in New York, why she was working this job, why she was hiding, flashed in her mind. She had lost everything because she refused to be bought off. If she took this money, she wasn't just a waitress. She was her accomplice. Maximus laughed, a short, brittle sound with no humor in it. "No," she said. Richard stiffened, the check frozen between his fingers. "No." "I don't want your hush money," Maximus replied, her tone sharpening, "and I won't apologize to a con artist." "Richard!" Beatrice screeched. "She's doing it again!" Maximus turned to her calmly. "Beatrice Suzon, that's your real name, isn't it? Not Kensington." You were a cheerleader at Okamar High, class of '94. You have a scar on your left earlobe from an infected piercing when you were 16. Beatrice clutched her ear. The colour drained from her face. Richard lowered the check slowly, his gaze fixed on his wife. "What did you say?" he asked, quietly dangerous. "I said your wife is a fraud," Maximus answered. "Check the Oklahoma records under Betty Susan. You'll find credit card fraud and a missing ex-husband named Earl." Beatrice panicked, begging to leave. Richard didn't move. He studied Maximus like an equal, not a server. "Who are you?" he asked. "Someone who hates bullies," she said. Maximus removed her apron, set it down neatly, thanked Julian, and walked out. In the silence that followed, Richard tore the check to shreds. "Get in the car, Beatrice," he said coldly. "We need to talk." Maximus didn't go home immediately. She knew how men like Richard van der Hoeven worked. If she went straight to her apartment, there would probably be a private investigator parked outside within the hour. She drove her rattling Civic into Queens, weaving through traffic, checking her rear-view mirror. She drove into a crowded shopping mall parking garage, parked on the 4th floor, and walked out. She took the subway 3 stops back into Astoria. Her apartment was a tiny basement studio that smelled of damp concrete and old books. It was a far cry from the life she used to have, but it was safe. Or at least, it had been until today. She locked the door, engaging all 3 deadbolts. She went to her closet and pulled out a heavy cardboard box from beneath a pile of winter sweaters. Inside were laptops, hard drives, and stacks of manila folders. Maximus Miller wasn't just a waitress. 3 years ago, she was Maximus Miller Vane, the lead investigative journalist for the Chicago Chronicle. She had won awards. She had taken down senators. But then she had gone after the wrong target, a pharmaceutical giant with connections to the mob. They hadn't just sued her, they had destroyed her. They planted drugs in her car, hacked her accounts, and ruined her reputation. She had fled Chicago with nothing but her skills and a desire to disappear. But the itch to find the truth never went away. She opened her laptop, a custom-built rig with military-grade encryption, and logged into a secure server. "Okay, Betty Sue," she muttered, cracking her knuckles. "Let's see who you really are." She had bluffed slightly at the restaurant. She knew the accent, and she had recognized the Kensington name as a defunct line. But she hadn't confirmed the Earl story yet. That was just a hunch based on a common pattern of grifters she had studied in the Midwest. She ran a facial recognition search on the photo she had snapped of Beatrice from the kitchen service station the night before. The software, something she still had access to thanks to an old contact at the FBI, whirred for a few minutes. Ping. A match. But it wasn't Oklahoma. The mugshot that popped up was from Nevada. 2008. Name, Brenda Skinner. Alias, Betty Suzon, Beatrice St. Cloud, Veronica Vane. Charges, grand larceny, identity theft, bigamy. "Bigamy," Maximus whispered, leaning closer to the screen. She scrolled through the file. Brenda had a habit of marrying wealthy, older men in Las Vegas and Reno, draining their accounts and vanishing before the ink on the marriage license was dry. But Richard van der Hoeven wasn't some senile retiree in Reno. He was a shark. How had she gotten past his background checks? Maximus dug deeper. She accessed the public marriage records for New York. Richard and Beatrice had been married for 2 years. Then Maximus found the anomaly. When Beatrice Skinner applied for the marriage license in New York, she had provided a birth certificate for Beatrice Kensington. It looked authentic. She has a forger, Maximus realized, a high-level one. Maximus's fingers flew across the keyboard. She traced the notary who had signed the marriage license, a man named Arthur P. Gantry. Maximus searched for Arthur P. Gantry. Obituary. Arthur P. Gantry, died in a boating accident 2 weeks after the Van der Hoven wedding. Maximus felt a chill run down her spine. This wasn't just a gold digger scam. This was a body count. She realized then that she had poked a bear much larger than she thought. Beatrice wasn't just a snobby socialite. She was a professional predator who had likely killed or had someone kill to cover her tracks. And Richard? Was he the mark, or was he the partner? Maximus's phone buzzed, an unknown number. She shouldn't answer it. But curiosity was her fatal flaw. "Hello? Ms. Miller," a distorted voice said. It sounded digital, robotic. "You have a very interesting search history." Maximus slammed the laptop shut, severing the connection, but she knew it was too late. They were watching her digital footprint. "Who is this?" she demanded. "A friend," the voice said. "Or an enemy. That depends on your next move. Beatrice van der Hoven is a dangerous woman, Maximus. But you have no idea who is actually pulling her strings. Is this Richard? Richard is blind," the voice said. "He sees only what he possesses. But the woman in his house answers to someone else. Someone from your past, Maximus." Maximus's blood ran cold. "My past?" "The syndicate hasn't forgotten you, Maximus Vane," the voice said, using her real last name. "Stop digging, or the next wine spill will be your blood." The line went dead. Maximus sat in the silence of her basement apartment. Her heart hammered against her ribs. The pharmaceutical syndicate from Chicago. They were here. And somehow, Beatrice was connected to them. Beatrice wasn't just a grifter. She was a plant. She was placed inside Richard van der Hoven's life to control him or to spy on him. Maximus stood up. She couldn't stay here. They knew where she was. She began throwing her hard drives into her bag. She needed to move, but she couldn't leave the city. If she ran now, they would hunt her down eventually. The only way out was through. She had to expose Beatrice to save herself. She needed to get to Richard van der Hoven. She needed to show him the mugshot of Brenda Skinner before the syndicate silenced her. But how does a fired waitress get a meeting with the most inaccessible billionaire in New York? She remembered something from the restaurant. Julian had mentioned that Richard had a routine. Every Friday morning, at 6 a.m., he played squash at the exclusive University Club on 54th Street. He went alone. No bodyguards inside the court. It was Thursday night. Maximus grabbed her bag, a can of pepper spray, and the printed mugshot of Brenda Skinner. "Table 4 is closed," she whispered to the empty room, "but the service isn't over." She opened her door to leave, but stopped. There was a man standing at the top of the basement stairs. He was wearing a dark suit and holding a suppressed pistol. "Going somewhere, Maximus?" He smiled. It was the customer who had laughed when Beatrice fell, the man from the back table. He wasn't a customer. He was a cleaner. Maximus slammed the door and locked the deadbolt, just as the first bullet splintered the wood of the doorframe. She scrambled toward the tiny bathroom window. It was her only exit. The real story was just beginning. The wood of the apartment door screamed as the deadbolt tore through the frame. The customer, a man Maximus now knew as Elias Thorne, a freelance cleaner for the Chicago syndicate, didn't bother kicking it again. He simply shouldered it open with the casual force of a battering ram. Maximus didn't wait to see him enter. She was already standing on the toilet tank, wrestling with the rusted latch of the bathroom window. It was a privacy window, narrow and high, meant to let steam out, not people. Crack. The bathroom door handle turned. She had locked it, but it wouldn't hold for long. The window latch gave way with a screech of oxidized metal. Maximus shoved the pane upward. The cold night air of Queens rushed in, smelling of exhaust and rain. She threw her bag through first, hearing it land with a soft thud in the alleyway trash. "Maximus!" Elias's voice came from right behind the bathroom door. It was calm, terrifyingly reasonable. "Don't make this messy. If you run, I have to chase. If I chase, I get annoyed." Maximus grabbed the frame and hauled herself up. She was slender, but her hips scraped painfully against the brick. She wiggled, kicking her legs, trying to find leverage. Bam! The bathroom door exploded inward. Maximus didn't look back. She threw her weight forward, tumbling headfirst out of the window, just as the deafening crack hiss of a silenced round chipped the brickwork inches from her left sneaker. She hit the alley floor hard. Her shoulder took the brunt of the impact, sending a jolt of nausea through her. But the adrenaline served as a painkiller. She scrambled to her feet, grabbed her bag, and ran. She didn't run toward the street. The street had street lights. Street lights meant visibility. She ran deeper into the alley network of Astoria, hurtling over overflowing trash bags and splashing through puddles of questionable liquid. She could hear the heavy, rhythmic thud of boots hitting the pavement behind her. Elias was fast. Maximus took a sharp left between two brick buildings, coming out onto a side street. She saw a delivery truck idling, the driver unloading crates of produce into a bodega. She didn't hesitate. As the driver walked into the store, Maximus ducked under the truck's rear bumper, wedging herself onto the spare tire mount underneath the chassis. It was a trick she had learned investigating cartel supply lines in Arizona. It was dangerous and dirty, but it was invisible. Seconds later, she saw Elias's shoes jog past the truck. He stopped. He turned in a circle, scanning the street. He looked right at the truck. Maximus held her breath. The exhaust pipe was burning her leg through her jeans. The driver came back out, slamming the rear door shut. The truck groaned, the engine roared, and they began to move. Maximus held on for dear life as the truck bounced over potholes. She was covered in road grit and grease. She rode for 20 minutes, her muscles screaming, until the truck came to a halt at a red light in Midtown Manhattan. She rolled off the spare tire mount, hitting the asphalt. She crawled to the sidewalk and collapsed into the shadows of a scaffolding tunnel. She checked her watch. 11:30 p.m. She was alive, but she was filthy. She was being hunted, and she had nowhere to go. She couldn't check into a hotel. They required ID, and Elias would be tracking her credit cards. She couldn't go to the police. The syndicate had officers on their payroll in 3 different precincts. That was how they had framed her for drug possession back in Chicago. She had to stay invisible until 6 a.m. She found a 24-hour laundromat on 9th Avenue. It was warm, bright, and full of people who didn't ask questions. Maximus went into the bathroom. She washed the grease off her face with gritty powdered soap. She took off her ruined waitress uniform and changed into the spare clothes she had in her bag, a pair of black yoga pants and a grey hoodie. She looked in the mirror. The Maximus Miller who served wine was gone. Maximus Vane, the journalist, stared back. Her eyes were hard, her jaw set. "You took everything from me once," she whispered to her reflection. "You're not taking this." She sat in the back of the laundromat, pretending to read a discarded newspaper, clutching her bag. She didn't sleep. Every time the door opened, her hand tightened around the pepper spray in her pocket. At 5 a.m., the city began to wake up. Delivery trucks, garbage collectors, the early shift workers. Maximus moved. She walked toward 54th Street. The University Club was a fortress of limestone and tradition. Members only. Jackets required. No denim. Certainly no fugitives. She walked around to the service entrance. A linen truck was unloading bags of clean towels. The driver was distracted, flirting with a kitchen staff member smoking a cigarette. Maximus saw her opening. She grabbed a stray laundry bag from the loading dock, threw it over her shoulder to hide her hoodie, and walked backward up the ramp, looking like she was part of the delivery crew. "Hey!" the kitchen worker shouted. Maximus froze. "You dropped a towel," the worker said, pointing to a white cloth on the ground. "Thanks," Maximus mumbled, keeping her head down. She grabbed the towel and hurried inside. She was in. Now she just had to find the squash courts. The university club was a maze of mahogany corridors and oil paintings of dead men. Maximus navigated by instinct, following the signs for the athletic department. She ditched the laundry bag in a janitor's closet. She looked out of place in her hoodie, but at this hour, the club was nearly empty. She reached the viewing gallery of the squash courts. Court 3. Through the glass back wall, she saw him. Richard van der Hoven was alone on the court. He was wearing all white, sweating profusely, smashing a small black ball against the wall with violent, rhythmic intensity. Thwack, thwack, thwack. He wasn't playing a game. He was venting rage. Maximus opened the glass door. Richard spun around, racket raised like a weapon. When he saw it was the waitress, his eyes widened in genuine shock. "You!" he breathed, lowering the racket slightly. "How the hell did you get in here?" "I have a specific set of skills," Maximus said, stepping onto the court. Her voice echoed in the high-ceilinged room. "And I didn't come for the $50,000, Richard." Richard wiped his forehead with a wristband. He looked at her, really looked at her. He saw the grease stains on her shoes, the dark circles under her eyes, the desperation in her stance. "You look like you've been through a war," he said. "I have," Maximus replied, "and you're losing yours." She walked forward and pulled the manila envelope from her hoodie pocket. She slapped the photos of Brenda Skinner against the glass wall of the court. "Her name is Brenda Skinner," Maximus said, her voice steady. "Wanted in Nevada for bigamy and grand larceny. She isn't a Kensington. She's a fraud. And she's working with the Chicago syndicate." Richard walked over to the glass. He stared at the mugshot. He didn't blink. Maximus expected him to deny it. She expected him to yell. Instead, Richard van der Hoven let out a long, shuddering sigh. He slumped against the wall, sliding down until he was sitting on the floor of the court. The titan of industry looked suddenly very small. "I know," Richard whispered. Maximus froze. "What?" "I know she's not Beatrice Kensington," Richard said, staring at the floor. "I've known for 6 months." "Then why?" Maximus demanded. "Why are you still with her? Why did you humiliate me to protect her?" Richard looked up, his grey eyes full of fear. "Because she isn't just a gold digger, Maximus. You said it yourself. The syndicate." He gestured for her to come closer. "I made a mistake 3 years ago," Richard confessed. "I needed liquidity for a skyscraper project in Dubai. The banks were stalling. A private equity firm stepped in. They gave me the money. Fast. Too fast." "The syndicate," Maximus realized. "They own the debt," Richard said. "And then they introduced me to Beatrice. I fell for it. I married her. By the time I realized she was a handler, it was too late. They have leverage on me, Maximus. They're laundering cartel money through my real estate developments. If I try to leave her, or if I try to fire her, they release the documents. I go to prison for money laundering. My company collapses. My legacy is destroyed." He looked at Maximus with pleading eyes. "She runs the house. She monitors my calls. That's why I was so hard on you yesterday. She was watching. If I showed mercy, she would report back that I was going soft." Maximus felt the pieces click together. It wasn't just a story about a rude wife. It was a story about a billionaire hostage. "So you're just going to let her win?" Maximus asked. "You're going to let them use you until they drain you dry?" "I don't have a choice," Richard said. They have a hitman, a cleaner. He watches the house. Elias, Maximus said. Richard nodded. You know him? He kicked down my door 4 hours ago, Maximus said. I'm the only loose end, Richard. They know I'm Maximus Vane. They know I'm the journalist who almost exposed them in Chicago. As long as I'm alive, Beatrice is at risk. Which means you are at risk. Richard stood up slowly. The fear in his eyes was being replaced by something else. Anger. They tried to kill you? Richard asked. Yes. And you came here instead of running? I'm done running, Maximus said. I have the evidence to prove Beatrice is a fraud. But that's not enough to stop the syndicate. We need to prove the money laundering. We need the ledger. Richard laughed bitterly. The ledger is on an encrypted drive. Beatrice wears it around her neck. It looks like a locket. She never takes it off. Maximus thought back to the restaurant. The diamond locket. Beatrice had clutched it when she fell. I can get it, Maximus said. How? Richard asked. She has security. She has Elias. You're going to invite me to dinner, Maximus said. Richard looked at her like she was crazy. What? Tonight, Maximus said, her mind racing, forming a plan. You're going to host a private dinner at the penthouse. You're going to tell Beatrice that you found me, that you broke me, and that I'm coming to apologize and sign the NDA in person. She'll love that, Richard admitted. She lives for humiliation. Exactly, Maximus said. Her ego is her blind spot. I'll come to the apartment. I'll sign the papers. And then when she's gloating, I'm going to take that locket. And Elias? Let me worry about Elias, Maximus said. But I need you to do one thing. When I give the signal, you need to cut the power to the penthouse. Richard looked at the waitress, the woman who had served him water yesterday, and who was now plotting a corporate heist. He extended his hand. If we pull this off, Richard said, I'll give you the scoop of the century. Exclusive rights. Maximus shook his hand. Deal. But first I need a shower and a dress. If I'm going to play the defeated servant, I need to look the part. Just then, the glass door of the squash court buzzed. Richard and Maximus both turned. Standing in the gallery, watching them with a phone pressed to his ear, was a man in a dark suit. He wasn't Elias. He was the club manager. Mr. van der Hoven, the manager said through the intercom. Your wife is on the line. She says it's an emergency. She knows you're not alone. Richard went pale. Maximus looked at the exit. She tracked your phone. My watch, Richard realized, looking at his wrist. It has GPS. She knows I'm here, Maximus said. Then we don't have until tonight, Richard said, gripping his racket. We have to move now. Richard, the manager's voice came again. She says if you don't pick up, she's sending security in. Maximus backed away toward the rear exit of the court. Plan B, she whispered. Get me out of here. Take me to the penthouse now. We ambush her on her own turf before she realizes we're working together. Richard nodded. He walked to the intercom. Tell my wife I'm coming home, Richard said firmly, and tell her I'm bringing a guest. The elevator to the penthouse was silent. It was a glass capsule rising 60 stories above Manhattan, but neither Maximus nor Richard looked at the view. Elias will be inside, Richard murmured, staring at the digital floor indicator as it ticked upward. He stands by the south balcony. He's right-handed. He keeps his weapon in a shoulder holster. And Beatrice? Maximus asked, adjusting the hem of her hoodie. She'll be on the sofa. Center of the room. She likes to be the focal point. Richard adjusted his cuffs. His hands were shaking, but his jaw was set. Are you ready? I was ready 3 years ago, Maximus said. The elevator chimed. The doors slid open. The Van der Hoven penthouse was a sprawling palace of white marble and gold accents. It screamed new money. In the center of the room, just as Richard had predicted, sat Beatrice. She was wearing a silk robe that likely cost more than Maximus's Honda, and she was sipping, what else, a glass of red wine. Standing in the shadows of the floor-to-ceiling windows was Elias. He didn't move, but his eyes locked onto Maximus instantly. "Well, well," Beatrice cooed, setting her glass down. "The prodigal husband returns." And he brought the stray dog. Richard stepped out of the elevator. She wanted to apologize, Beatrice. She insisted. Beatrice stood up, a cruel smile playing on her lips. She walked toward them, the heels of her slippers clicking on the marble. She stopped 3 feet from Maximus. "I bet she did," Beatrice sneered. She looked Maximus up and down with disgust. "Look at you. You look like a drowned rat. I suppose you want me to call off the lawyers. You want to beg for your miserable little life?" Maximus kept her head down, feigning submission. "I just want this to be over, Mrs. Van der Hoven." "It's Mrs. Kensington Van der Hoven," Beatrice corrected sharply. "And if you want my forgiveness, you're going to have to earn it." Beatrice pointed to the floor. "On your knees." Richard stiffened. Maximus felt the tension radiating off him. This wasn't in the script. "I said," Beatrice raised her voice, her accent slipping into that hard, rural twang again. "On your knees. Beg me." Maximus slowly lowered herself to one knee. She bowed her head. "I'm waiting," Beatrice hissed, stepping closer, looming over her. The diamond locket around her neck swung in the light. The drive, the evidence. "I'm sorry," Maximus whispered. Louder. "I'm sorry," Maximus said, looking up, her green eyes blazing with sudden, terrifying intensity. "I'm sorry you have such terrible taste in wine." Beatrice blinked. "What?" "And," Maximus added, "your shoe is untied." Beatrice instinctively looked down. In that split second, Maximus didn't beg. She launched herself upward like a coiled spring. She didn't go for Beatrice's face. She went for the neck. Maximus's hand clamped around the diamond locket. She yanked it with all her strength. The gold chain snapped with a sharp pop. "Richard, now!" Maximus screamed. Beatrice shrieked, clutching her neck. "Kill her! Elias! Kill her!" Elias moved. He drew his pistol in one fluid motion, aiming at Maximus's back. But Richard Van der Hoven, the man who had been a passive hostage in his own life for 3 years, moved too. He grabbed a heavy, bronze sculpture of a falcon from the entry table and swung it with the desperate strength of a man fighting for his soul. Crack! The bronze statue connected with Elias's arm just as the gun went off. The bullet went wild, shattering $1 million vase in the corner. Elias grunted in pain, dropping the gun. "Run, Maximus!" Richard roared, tackling the hit man. Richard was a squash player, fit for his age, but Elias was a killer. Elias drove a knee into Richard's stomach, sending the billionaire wheezing to the floor. Elias scrambled for the loose gun. Maximus had the locket. She could run. She could get back to the elevator. But she saw Elias raising the gun, aiming at Richard's head. Maximus didn't run. She looked at the wine bottle sitting on the low coffee table, the 1999 Romane Conti, the same vintage from the restaurant. She grabbed the bottle by the neck. "Hey!" Maximus shouted. Elias turned his head. Maximus hurled the bottle. It wasn't a graceful throw, but it was accurate. The heavy glass bottle spun through the air and struck Elias square in the forehead. The bottle didn't break, but Elias did. He crumpled to the floor, unconscious. Silence fell over the penthouse. Maximus stood there, panting, the locket clutched in her hand so tight it cut into her palm. Beatrice was standing by the fireplace, holding a fire poker. Her face was twisted into a mask of pure hatred. Give me that, Beatrice snarled. You have no idea who you are messing with. The people I work for. They will skin you alive. Brenda, Maximus said, holding the locket up. It's over. My name is Beatrice, she screamed, lunging forward. Maximus didn't move. She didn't fight back. She simply pointed to the wall behind Beatrice. Look at the TV. Beatrice froze. The massive 85-inch screen on the wall had flickered to life. It wasn't a TV show. It was a live feed from the building's lobby security camera. Dozens of agents in FBI windbreakers were swarming the entrance. Richard didn't cut the lights, Maximus said calmly. When he called home from the club, he didn't trigger the smart home system. He triggered a silent panic alarm connected directly to the federal authorities. He turned himself in. Brenda. He confessed to the money laundering. He gave them everything, including you. Beatrice dropped the fire poker. The color drained from her face. No, she whispered. No, he wouldn't. He's a coward. Richard groaned, pulling himself up from the floor, clutching his ribs. He looked at his wife. He looked bruised, bleeding, and older than his years. But he was smiling. I was a coward, Richard said softly. But then I met a waitress who taught me that some things are too expensive to pay for. The elevator chimed again. FBI, hands in the air. Agents poured into the room, weapons drawn. Beatrice, Brenda Skinner, didn't fight. She slumped onto the white sofa, looking small and defeated. As they handcuffed her, she looked at Maximus one last time. Who are you? Brenda asked, her voice trembling. You're not a waitress. Maximus walked over to the table, picked up the unbroken bottle of Romane Conti, and checked the label. I'm Maximus Vane, she said. Senior investigative journalist for the New York Times, and you just gave me the front page. 6 months later. The Obsidian room was buzzing. It was a Friday night, and every table was full. Julian, the manager, was no longer sweating. He was beaming. He walked over to table 4, the prime booth. Your usual table, Miss Vane? Julian asked. Maximus smiled. She looked different. Her hair was down, and she was wearing a sharp blazer. She wasn't carrying a tray, she was carrying a tablet. Thanks, Julian, she said. Sitting across from her was Richard. He looked thinner, and he was wearing an ankle monitor under his trousers, part of his plea deal for cooperating against the syndicate. He had lost his company, his fortune, and his penthouse. He was currently living in a modest apartment in Brooklyn and consulting for a non-profit. He looked happier than he ever had as a billionaire. So, Richard said, picking up the menu. How is the book doing? Bestseller list for 3 weeks straight, Maximus said. The Waitress and the Wolf. The movie rights just sold. Who's playing me? Richard asked. Please tell me it's George Clooney. They're thinking Danny DeVito, Maximus joked. Richard laughed, a genuine laugh. And Brenda? Richard asked, his smile fading slightly. 20 years, Maximus said. And the syndicate is being dismantled piece by piece. The data on that locket took down 3 senators and a cartel boss. To the locket, Richard said, raising his water glass. To the wine, Maximus corrected, raising hers. A new waitress approached the table. She was young, nervous, and her hands were shaking as she held the water pitcher. I'm sorry, the girl stammered. It's my first day. Maximus looked at the girl. She saw the fear. She saw the exhaustion. Maximus didn't get angry. She didn't check for water spots. She smiled warmly. Take your time, Maximus said gently. We're not going anywhere. And if anyone gives you trouble, just come find me. The girl smiled back, relieved. Maximus Vane took a sip of her water. It was perfectly cold, and for the first time in 3 years, it tasted like freedom. And that is the story of how Beatrice van der Hoven, the woman who terrorized Manhattan, lost everything because she underestimated a waitress. She thought power came from money, fear, and a fake name. But she learned the hard way that the most dangerous person in the room isn't the one shouting. It's the one watching, listening, and waiting for the right moment to strike. Maximus didn't just serve dinner that night. She served justice. And Richard? He lost his billions, but he gained his life back. Sometimes you have to lose everything to find out who you really are. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss a video. Thanks for watching.